Hi, I'm Paul Moorshead. I'm a Fellow of the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. I'm also a Fellow of the Chartered Insurance Institute, and as well as that, I'm a Certified Enterprise Risk Actuary. In total, I've passed close to 30 professional exams, mostly at the first sitting, so I know a thing or two about how to succeed in the exam room. But it wasn't always that way. I did much less well at school, university, exams, often getting frustrated that people in my class did better despite my best efforts. And it was only after I'd learned the right way to approach exams efficiently that I had all my success. So, if you're sitting there panicking with a month or so to go until the exams, then you'll want to watch this video and benefit from my experiences. Enjoy the brief break from your study books, because after this video, you'll be itching to get back into your studying and attack the exams with a whole new mindset. So, it's less than a month until the exam. What you need to do now is focus on passing the exam or exams. From today, your mindset must shift to maximising your chances of getting a pass mark on the exam day. Step 1, focus your studying. Stop book learning and start learning how to pass the exam. That means from now on, your primary study technique is going to be exam practice, both open and closed book. I'll explain more shortly. Step 2, you need your brain to be on top form on the exam day. So we need to instigate some new routines. The most important of these is a good sleep routine. No one ever yawned their way to exam success. We want to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, full of energy on the exam day. So that means going to bed and waking up at the same time every day from now until after the exams. That means cutting down or out stimulants. That means no phones in the bedroom. Other helpful routines would be around food and exercise, although a slice or two of cake as a reward is fine by me. Step 3, we don't want any last-minute stresses. So today, read the exam entry instructions and then go sort out your inventory for the exam day. The IFoA has specific calculator restrictions, for example, so make sure you've got the right one. In fact, it's worth spending another £20 to get a second calculator to avoid the risk of a complete disaster on the day, and a wasted 6 months of studying, of course. We want a pencil case stuffed with working, comfortable pens. I'm left-handed, so nothing fancy that could smudge. You also want a ruler, and obviously a timekeeping device. You want your passport or other ID packed away now, alongside your exam entry form. Write your student ID down. Get your formula book ready, although you probably have to wait to pack that one. Now, I do appreciate that I think the exams this time might be online, so some of that might not be necessary, but if you're watching this after the pandemic, hopefully that will be useful information. So let's talk about how to make this exam practice count. We want to do a mix of open and closed book exam practice. Why is that? Well, open book exam practice has loads of benefits. By definition, you're doing highly targeted studying towards exactly what the examiners want you to reproduce in the exam. You're also honing your exam technique. You get to learn the active question words such as describe, compare and list, and see what kind of answers the examiners want when they use them. You get to look up the key knowledge that the examiners want to test twice in a row, reinforcing that knowledge. First, when you find it in the study materials and write it down. And secondly, when you compare your effort against the model answer. And I would always recommend writing down any answers you didn't get to help retain that information. This is also a good point to reflect on how hard it was to spot your points when they were buried in a long paragraph of flowery text. This is why we use bullet points, underlining and white space in our answers. Make it easy for the examiner to give you full credit. And if you went off on a tangent and didn't answer the question asked, you can use the model answer to help understand why you did this, and hence further hone your technique for the future. By the way, don't do an open book exam under time pressure, or even in one go. 30 to 60 minutes is really the maximum you should study in one go, before taking a break to refresh and refocus yourself. Get some sunlight or a snack or a quick chat with someone, and then back on it. Little and often is the mantra here. You should be studying for the majority of your study day. Just don't sit at a desk for hours and hours getting diminishing returns as you've lost focus or energy. So, open book exam practice has loads of benefits, but closed book exam practice does too. It's really important for assessing how well you are retaining the bookwork, and also for honing your time management skills. We'll talk about time management and the only way We'll talk about time management later, and the only way to practice that is under time pressure. Although I do appreciate it's harder to replicate that pressure at home. So when doing a closed book exam, you should take the full 3 hours and complete the exam in one sitting. This helps you get used to the conditions in the exam room and trains you to concentrate for such a long time. You can experiment with hydration and food too to see what works for you. When I was studying, I would always do a closed book exam within the first month of studying a new course. Why? Well, this small time investment. I don't have a photographic memory, so I wouldn't be able to write for more than an hour or two at this point anyway. This little effort would really help me to understand what I'm studying for. Remember, the purpose of your studying efforts is to pass the exam, not necessarily to commit every last piece of knowledge to long-term memory. So this way I got to see what kind of exam questions I would be up against and tailor my studying towards that end. Anyway, that's for the next sittings. For this time, I would say that the last exam paper you sit before the exam itself must be a closed book exam. This is so you can score well and get your confidence up. And if things don't go so well, then be happy it's just a marker, not the real thing. But then maybe reflect that it was actually a tricky paper, which many people would have struggled with. This experience can also be helpful to prepare yourself for the unexpected in the actual exam room. It's useful to keep a record of which topics come up in all the past papers you attempt, and to then analyse this information to see which topics come up often, and then make sure you know how to answer those questions. If the examiners keep asking for the 2 lists in chapter 1, then learn those off by heart. I remember when I sat FCII, it was such a long exam that it seemed to me that basically the examiners asked the same questions every time. Okay, let's fast forward to 24 hours before the exam. You've been putting in good hours practicing exams and revising the key lists. What do you do now in this crucial period of time? I want to look you in the eye now and say to you simply, stop studying completely. I must be crazy, you say. No, this is what I did for every single exam I passed. What's the benefit of stopping now at the last hurdle? Well, let's think about this in a few ways. Do you think marathon runners run a marathon a day before the race? No, not at all. That's a rest day for them, to avoid wasting their strength for the main event. Imagine some nice shells nestled in the sand under a clear blue sea. You can see them all clearly if you stay out of the water, but stick your hand in to grab one or put another shell on the seabed and you just stir up the sand, rippling the water, and you won't be able to see any of the shells. One of our key goals is to be well rested for the exam itself. So you want a good night's sleep the night before the exam, and hence a late night study session must be out of the question, as must be worrying about the exam. So stop about lunchtime, let your thoughts settle down in your head. If you're well prepared, then last minute cramming will be counterproductive. You also want to rest your hand for the 3-hour writing epic to come tomorrow. Don't worry, I've got a list of tasks to take your mind off things and de-stress ahead of the big day. We're going to be stuck inside most of tomorrow, so get outside for a well-being walk. This is better than a run, as it's less tiring and also gets you outside in the fresh air for longer to clear your mind. Call your parents or your friends or anyone really who doesn't care that it's IFoA exam fortnight and just talk about anything but the exams. Go shopping for a good healthy dinner, a good healthy breakfast and lunch if necessary, as well as good exam snacks. We'll talk about the main meals later, but for now, let's talk about exam snacks. You're going to be exercising your brain enormously for 3 hours straight tomorrow. You don't go to the gym and drink nothing, do you? And one of the first things you do after the gym is eat something to regain energy. It's just the same in the exam, except this is like running the marathon, so you need to top up your energy throughout. Someone once remarked to me, it looked like I'd brought a picnic to the exam, but that's because I was very concerned about being at peak performance level throughout the whole 3-hour exam. Get thirsty or have an energy drop, and I won't be concentrating fully or racking up marks at the optimal rate I need. So you need at least 1 bottle of water, preferably 2. You want slow release energy snacks such as nuts or satsumas. These are quiet snacks too, which is important in an exam room. You might want a fast release snack such as a chocolate bar or energy drink for the last 30 minutes or so, but not before, as we don't want an energy slump on our hands halfway through the exam. Again, this might not be necessary this time, but in future, plan how you are going to travel to the exam centre. If you're going by train, then buy your ticket in advance to guarantee you won't hit the queue and miss your train. Similarly, plan where you're going to park and your route of going by car. We don't want to have to think about anything at all unnecessary tomorrow morning. Now's the time to pack your bag with all the things we prepared a month ago. We don't want to be stressfully rushing around in the morning. On to the evening, we have 3 things to achieve: not worrying about the exam, eating a good meal, and getting a good night's sleep. So just chill out with family or friends, watch a movie, stream some TV. Eat a simple and wholesome meal at a sensible hour, i.e. at least a few hours before bedtime. And don't eat anything which could upset your stomach. Celebratory takeaway can wait until after the exam. Keep avoiding those stimulants. Then follow your now established normal bedtime routine and get a good night's sleep in. Don't go to bed early, just act normally. When you wake up on the morning of the exam, make sure you have a good breakfast. You want slow release carbs, so go for something like porridge. As usual, avoid stimulants. Remember, we're not studying, so no last minute cramming. You're allowed 1 check of your bag for the exam, but no more. Remember, we're calm and prepared, so no need for obsessive checking. If it's an afternoon exam, then have a good healthy lunch again with slow release carbs. Yet, again, avoid stimulants. Make sure you get to the exam centre early. I used to get there an hour before and do some mindfulness and also get my exam face on. Maybe 1 hour was too much, but do not be the person arriving flustered just as the exam starts. Chatting to friends can help relax you, but don't talk to anyone about the exam. We're focusing on having a stress-free, clear head. General chit-chat is great though, and will help relax you. Okay, now for the exam itself. Your purpose in the next 3 hours is to get as many marks as possible. It's not to write beautiful, flowery text or to answer the question you wish had been asked. The examiners have a marking schedule. The marks available to each question are clearly labelled for them, and it's your job to snaffle up as many of those marks as possible, as efficiently as you can. And remember, the pass mark is not 100%, so you don't have to get everything right, and you could even mess up a whole question and still pass. Although, hopefully with my advice, that won't happen. You need to consider the exam in 3 separate stages, which is planning, answering, and checking your answers. If you miss out any one of these stages, you'll find it much harder for yourself. So let's go through them step by step. Planning first. There are 100 marks to get and 180 minutes in which to acquire them. We want to leave time for checking our answers, so let's give ourselves 150 minutes for answering those 100 marks. That's 1.5 minutes or 90 seconds per mark. So for a 10-mark question, we will allow ourselves 15 minutes to answer and no more. Then we need to decide which order to answer these questions. Let me look you in the eye again. Never, I repeat, never answer the questions in numerical order. Instead, we're going to quickly read through all the exam questions and put them into a 2x2 grid with easy, hard along the top and short, long along the side. Short, long is decided by how many marks are available, say greater or less than 10 marks, whereas easy, hard is subjectively decided by our quick assessment of each question. What we want to do is ease ourselves into the exam, warming up our brain in the process, just like an athlete before a big race. We should do this with a short, easy question or 2. Quite possibly these will be bookwork or quick calculation type questions, which we've seen many times in our practice exam sessions. This is where using mnemonics and other flashcards or whatever you can to hammer in those essential lists while studying is so important, as it enables you to quickly reproduce these lists in the exam room, thus freeing up time for the deeper thinking questions. Once we've done our easy, short questions, we want to get some serious marks on the board by hitting the long, easy questions. After that, we should be ready to face the hard, long questions before finishing off with the hard, short questions. Don't be afraid to split up a long question into shorter pieces and leave the harder parts for later. Quite often they are only connected tangentially, and so this split won't harm your ability to answer them. It might help you avoid getting hung up or stuck on a tricky sub-question. Next, I'd write down my exam plan. I'd put down columns for question number, incremental minutes, cumulative minutes, time start, time end, incremental marks, and cumulative marks. Then I fill in the question numbers and minutes and marks in line with my grid above. Quickly check the cumulative marks add up to 100 and that the time ends a good 15 to 30 minutes before the end of the exam. I once had an exam where I put all but one of the questions into the hard bucket during the planning phase. I clearly wasn't feeling it that day or had panicked, but anyway, I stuck with it. And that one easy question was the tiny crack of an opening I needed to get into that exam. As my brain warmed up, more questions moved over into the easy bucket, and I was able to clamber question by question up the cliff face and ended up passing that exam first time. So don't give up if the exam looks tricky. In fact, I used to celebrate tough exams because I knew I prepared well, and so everyone else was probably finding things even tougher than me. It's harder to differentiate yourself if every question is easy. Now, on to the answering phase. Your two mantras in this part of the exam are points make prizes and state the obvious. Every single thing you write down should be gaining you marks. Generally, you'll get half a mark per point made. This is where the bookwork you put in will really help you, as there will often be a sizable number of marks for listing out sections of the study notes. Remember, you've got 90 seconds per mark, so that pushes you towards bullet points and away from flowery, wordy prose. It's also useful to underline, using a ruler, the final answer to any maths question. Again, this is to help the examiner follow your points and award you the full marks you deserve. Stating the obvious is missed by even the best candidates. There are a bunch of marks available for writing down what seem like obvious points. You should have noticed this from your exam practice, but I'll say it again. There are no special bonus marks for the clever points, and instead each mark counts equally towards the pass mark. So say relevant things like, it's a large insurer, so they will have greater diversification of risk, or it's a small insurer, so they will naturally spend relatively more on reinsurance. Look carefully in the questions for the indicators for these obvious, essentially 3 marks. What kind of insurer, what kind of insurance, what kind of country, what kind of time period, etc., etc. Once you've got those down, you can worry about the higher order points. Also, rephrasing the same point is worthless and just wastes time. If you don't have the 7th and 8th points for a 4-mark question, then leave a space for them and move on to the next question. A new idea or two might come up when you come to check your answers at the end. On that point, I would generally leave lots of white space at the end of my answer to each question. This makes my exam paper easier to review in my checking phase, as well as leaving space for any last-minute amendments. Perhaps even more importantly, it makes my exam script much clearer and easier for the examiners to mark, and I want them to have that nice, warm, fuzzy feeling when they're marking my work. Remember, keep grazing on your snacks and drinking your water throughout the answer phase to keep your hydration and energy levels up. It is fundamentally important that you answer the question posed and not the question you hoped for. There's a strict exam marking schedule, and it does not have spaces for clever but irrelevant points. In fact, I had a boss who was a chief examiner, and he used to joke about giving negative points for stupid ideas. So do stick to the topic and don't just put down anything you can think of. If you're using mnemonics or other tools to generate ideas, it is not enough to just say tax or stakeholder management. You need to link your point to the question. And so writing something specific like, there will be tax advantages to the insurer of investing in this product due to the regulatory regime in place, is much more likely to get you the desired half mark than just putting tax advantages. Look very carefully at and for the active question words such as describe, compare, contrast, list, calculate, and do exactly what the question says. Remember, you get half a mark per point, so a list question worth 3 marks needs 6 concise points. Similarly, you need to describe 4 features for a 2-mark describe question. And you'll end up with half marks at best if you on a compare or contrast question, if you only write one side of the comparison or contrast. It's a well-known fact that it's easier to get the first half of the available marks on a question than the second half, but yet people still overrun on the time available for each question as they rack their brains to find those last few elusive points. Let me look at you in the eye again and say no. When the time is up for that question, you stop, and I do mean stop mid-sentence, and you move on to the easy marks available on the next question instead. If you plan well and stick to the schedule, then you'll have time at the end to add a few plausible new points to that question, and even finish your half sentence. I'll say this one quietly so the IFoA don't hear. Sometimes the exam has an error in it. Sometimes the question is poorly phrased and you could answer it in 2 different ways. Now, the key when this happens is to not panic. Follow the question logically, but then add a point about how the final answer is not sensible and why. For example, this calculated loss ratio of 1000% is unlikely to be viable. If the question has 2 possible ways to answer it, then giving a bit of both approaches is probably optimal, as you might get credit for the first easy marks on both approaches. Lastly, beware the mathsy questions. There are often questions which shout out calculations to you, and you naturally think, I do calcs like that all the time. However, make sure you're aware of just how many calculations are required and keep a close eye on the clock. Often such mathsy questions require literally hundreds of calculations for just a dozen marks. Don't be that person, and it's lots of people. You spend a whole hour bashing keys on their calculator and end up with just 10 marks at the end of it. When we got to the end of answering the questions, I would normally have a celebratory comfort break. Maybe those 2 bottles of water was too much. I'd also tuck into my high energy chocolate bar for the last dash of marks in the checking phase. Exams are high pressure situations. Errors are common, either in missing the question entirely or calculation or spelling errors. So checking your work is of fundamental importance. This 15 to 30 minutes is well spent and can make the difference between passing and failing, so do not skip it. At the end, your brain is probably buzzing and you'll find you can quickly come up with bonus points of questions where you either ran out of time or ideas earlier in the exam. Quite often the other questions will have inspired new answers too, so fill these in now. If you have bad handwriting like me, then this is also the time to cross out and rewrite words which got blurred in your haste to answer. Remember, we want to make it easy for the examiner to spot our points and hence award us marks. It does happen sometimes that you spot a fundamental misalignment between your answer and the real question at this checking stage. If so, again, don't panic and do not cross out your answer. Instead, do quickly add the easy marks on each part of the question to try to salvage something. And do never, ever be the person who out of frustration or cockiness leaves the exam early. You've worked 6 long months for this, so use those last 30 minutes or an hour to scrape every last mark out of this paper. Reread the questions, see if there are any more obvious marks you can put down. Triple check your existing answers. Anything to help your cause is more valuable to you now than anything else you're planning to spend that 30 minutes on. Remember, it's hard to know for sure if you've passed or failed, but every mark you scrape now will make it more likely that you've passed. When the bell goes and you put down your pen, just take a moment to congratulate yourself for a job well done. Don't start beating yourself up about question X where you missed point Y. It's over and you've done your best. Lastly, after the exam, do not talk about how it went with your friends. I've come out of exam rooms feeling completely deflated and knowing that the questions didn't fall my way and yet still passed. I've heard people bragging about acing the exam who are then a lot less happy when the results come out. So keep your own counsel and mentally move on to the next exam, this session or maybe the next session completely. Order your next course now. Yeah, seriously, this whole qualification process is a marathon and we want to be one step ahead of our competitors. So I really hope you found this helpful and would love to read your tips for the exams in the comments below. Please share them with me and the other people watching this video. I'll probably put out another video in due course covering how you should approach exams from the beginning, i.e. 6 months before the exam date. So if you found this one useful, do keep an eye out for that video in future. And if you benefited from this one, please like and subscribe to support these videos. Good luck, and of course, you can buy me a drink at your qualification ceremony. Bye.